All right, so on last week's episode, we got the tires and the wheels mounted. They're 18s front and rear. We also got the fork mounted. For the rear shocks, we've got them at 14.5 inches. They're pretty much the tallest shock that is readily available. But the issue now is that the bike has a downward slope. You know, this bike was originally more of a cruiser than a sport bike, and we want to make it look more sporty. So we want to have the rake go in the opposite direction. Originally, I thought I would just cut this tail section off and move the shock mounting down, and that would be enough to get this slope out of it. If not, at least get it flat. But in order to get the 4 degrees out, that is what this is sitting at, we'd have to drop this rear tire about 3 inches, right? So you raise this up, the swing arm stays the same, or the tire touching the ground, and then we bring this up. Cutting this off and just going straight isn't going to be nearly enough. The other issue is that at 3 inches, I think there's going to be interference with the chain and the pivot of the swing arm. So if you go too far, now you've got the chain rubbing on the swing arm. We don't want to do that. I'm trying to save this center section so that we can make the electronics tray and kind of leave that where it is. I really don't want to get up into where it attaches to the up into this part here. I don't want to cut the tube all the way back and recreate all of this. What I'm going to try and do is cut the back end off and then just raise, kind of bend these 2 tubes here, bend these upward. And I'm hoping that by bending that upward, we're saving the swing arm from dropping down too much. The shock height's kind of a limitation. I just don't have, here I might have, you know, across here I might have maybe 2 inches of lift. I really don't have enough, and even when I get this raised up, it's still not enough. So, you know, here's the goal: just kind of bend the frame here and get this leveled out while keeping the bike kind of where it's at. Then on the tank, I'm just going to remove the studs. I want to clear some of this gap up here anyway, so I'm going to cut the studs off that mount the tank, kind of move it forward and drop it down and get that rake. This has slightly less of a downward slope by about 1 degree from this section here. So I'll probably just go ahead and make those straight since I'm going to have to dig into it that deep. This here probably is the most challenging part of this. You want to keep the frame square. You want to keep everything lined up, and you know, even just supporting the bike is more of a challenge. I'm going to put it on the center stand, and that's going to help me kind of get the bike lifted. The other thing you want to keep in mind is when you put it on the center stand and you find another way to lift it, you don't have half the weight way back here and half the weight on the front, right? It's kind of shifting your center point there, and so you're not loading the front end as much as you would. So I'm going to zip tie kind of a marker on the strut on the fork here so that I know that this is where the bike sits with normal weight on it. Just so I know if this gets less weight on it and the fork raises up, then I know that I'm off and that I'm not fighting something that, you know, because that could make a difference of 1 degree back here just by transferring the weight. So yeah, that's the plan for today. We'll cut it off somewhere here back here and then just kind of bend the subframe up. These right here, I'm probably gonna have to cut that somewhere inside of here. So that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. So you can see when I put it up on the center stand, it kind of shifted the weight more towards the middle and took some of the weight off the front end. So we'll have to maybe ratchet strap it down to get it back where it was. It didn't move a whole lot, but it is enough to make a degree of difference. So you can see now that we're up on the center stand, I've got a couple inches of clearance below the tire. And up here, we're still sitting at 3 degrees up here, so we'd have to go even higher. And then here's where we would have the chain clearance issue. So far we've got this cut. I tried to bend up on it a little bit. You know, it is flimsy, but it's not flimsy enough to get it to bend and hold. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and take this section off. I'm gonna grind the welds here. I wanna keep this plate, and I kinda wanna keep this shape so it looks kind of factory, and it's got a fold on the backside here that gives it some rigidity. So I'm gonna try and save all of it just by grinding the welds away, and then I'm gonna come up through here with the parting blade and slice this whole section off. Then I'm gonna come up here and just kind of grind this away so that I can bend this up, and then nobody will know any different, because I'll just re-weld that back. So you can kind of see it breaking through, and as you're grinding it, you'll see it turn discolored and dark because it's getting thin and heating up. We don't want to make it too thin, so I'm cutting heavier on this side than I am on the other side. Hopefully that leaves me enough material to weld it back. And there we go. Came off pretty easy. Now we're just going to cut the other side. Hopefully that goes as smooth. All right, to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to try and make these tubes as even as possible, so when I put the tailpiece, it can be even as well and I don't have to lopside it. So because of the body of this thing, I just can't get in there. Not very well anyway, so I think I'm gonna try the Sawzall and see if that'll get down in there much better. All right, so you can see the cut there. Went pretty deep with it, hoping that I can move it up pretty easy without too much effort. I don't want to be fighting things. And there's the other side. All right, so here we are, still at, you can't really see it, but it's at almost 3 degrees. All right, we're just using some 3/4 inch aluminum that I had sitting around to put it in there and use it kind of as a cheater bar. I've got 2 of them in there. I think it'll be a little easier to push them both at the same time. All right, so far I've got it about 2 degrees. It's a little tricky because I'm actually lifting the bike. It's at 3. I'm gonna go ahead and strap the bike down because it keeps wanting to lift it, and I don't want it. I've only got it on the center stand, and I don't want it to come off that center stand. There isn't a hole. You know, if you push it forward, the center stand drops, and that's kind of the last thing I want to do right now is drop that. Alright, so here's where we're at. I've taken the bike off the center stand and lowered it down to about where it was originally. So with the shock up there, you can see now I've got room to go up. Where we were before with the bike so jacked up is that I was way up here, you know, probably a couple inches. By bringing the bike down, you know, bringing the whole thing down, now I've got the room to raise the tail end up, right? Like, so put more angle in there. So we dropped it down, and now we're just gonna kick it up like that. And that's what's gonna give us the room. So we're gonna give that a shot. Let's try it again now that everything's strapped. All right. So we got it to about, let's get dirt. It's about 3.5 degrees. I'll probably just come up a hair more. Mock up where the shocks are going to be. So they're going to be somewhere in there. The other thing to remember is that this angle here and the shock angle should remain the same. If you end up changing this angle for whatever reason, just keep in mind that, you know, the more over you get, the softer the spring is going to become, and the more high or the more vertical you become, the stiffer it's going to be. So since we don't want to change any of that, we want to stay parallel with this brace, and this brace is also parallel to the front one usually. So we just want to keep all three of these guys parallel. So you can see we're kind of cutting it close, so we'll continue to pull up. Kind of puts us somewhere in there. Because the other thing we got to remember is wherever we mount this, we don't have any weight on it right now. All the weight's sitting on the blocks. So we kind of want to shoot over, you know, where we're going to be, because it is going to sag back down once we put the weight of the bike onto the shocks. So you can see there, the gap's starting to open up. Down here, we're using the swing arm to ensure that we're still at 0, right? Like that's going to be, we know that that's going to need to be parallel. We can use this as a 0 point. And then up here, we can see that we're off and that we need to tweak it a little bit. So we'll, you know, raise this side up to try and bring that back into 0 to make sure that we're staying parallel. Try that now. All right, perfect. Because I just kind of eyeballed this when I cut it, they're not exactly straight. I do want to make this straight before I continue. I need this straight so that when I put tubing back here, it's just going to make it easier so that you have, you know, the tube sitting against tube, not that it's cut. You got to fill it with weld. So the trick here is if you take a piece of tape and you keep it straight, if you line back up, then it'll give you a nice straight line. And we'll just use the edge of the tape. You know, as long as they touch back up, you know, wrinkled or anything, you know that you got it perfect. So we'll grind down to the lip of the tape there. Now you can see the tank profile didn't change, right? Like we just bent the back up. So what we're gonna have to do is drop the front end of the tank a little bit and raise the back end so that we can get this parallel with the seat now. So basically, you're gonna end up with something like that. So to get there, we gotta cut these tabs off and then kind of mock it up where we want it. Nothing permanent yet, just a kind of ballpark. I'll stuff something up there, maybe some rags or something, just to hold it in place, just to figure out where I'm gonna put it. Throw the tank back up there, it's just gonna kind of float now, but the reason why we're going through this exercise now is so that we can get the length of the seat right before we cut and put that. Looks like we're a little tight here. That's kind of limiting it from going forward anymore or coming down. So to correct that, we just have to raise the rear up. But I might take a hammer to this and flare this edge out a little bit because I don't want it to hit, obviously, and two, it'll give us a little more clearance. Because the other thing we need to do is set the angle, the seat bars across the bottom of this tank's pretty flat, so puts us somewhere in there like that. But yeah, we'll find something to kind of mock that up with. All right, so here's where I'm kind of at right now. About the end of the day, so it's kind of a good stopping point. But I'm limited to how far down I can go with this tank because of how the tank hits the frame here. So what I'm gonna have to do is move it up a little bit to get it to clear, which is fine because I prefer the tank to be more or closer to the height of the triple tree. However, I can't get this to match the angle that I've set this tail section to. So I'm gonna have to bring the tail section down a little bit, but I think it's gonna be okay. Here we're at about 5 degrees on this tank, and because the seat's gonna sit on top of the tubes, I'm not gonna come down below the tubes, I'm gonna sit right on top. I think it'll be okay because I'm gonna get the seat and the bottom of the seat and the bottom of the tank to be on the same line. So, you know, raising this up to where it's sitting on top of the tubes, I think it's gonna be just fine here. And that kind of maximizes how much I can get out of the tank. So I really need to get this tank figured out before I move on to the tail. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and weld the little bosses back on so I make sure that I got the tank right where I need it so that we can be perfectly even all the way across. But yeah, that's where we're at. So we're gonna leave it there and pick back up with it tomorrow. All right, well, I was headed home, but I decided I wanted to see a little bit of a mock-up before I went home. So we've got, I just threw some weld clamps up there to kind of hold the tail section almost straight. And then I've got a ruler under here to hold the gas tank. I'm still kind of playing with where the gas tank's gonna sit. Then over here, I just zip tied around the tire to throw the shock up there and make sure I was in the kind of in the right ballpark of where I need to be. Yeah, no, I'm pretty pumped. Like, to me, this is the most exciting part of the build, right? Like, you start to see what things are gonna look like. You know, you kind of get an idea of how things are gonna fall. You don't realize it, but this part's probably taken me. Well, I've been at this all day, so I don't know, I've probably been working on this 6 or 8 hours, but you know, there's so much back and forth here. You know, thinking, figuring it out, getting things to the line, moving things. It's really not, you spend a lot more time thinking and playing than you do actually getting something done. But now that there's kind of a plan in motion, or we've got things kind of figured out, it'll move a little quicker. You know, I was getting kind of worried with how the tail was moving, that I wasn't gonna have enough space, or I wasn't gonna be able to lift it up enough, but no, I'm pretty pleased with it. I like keeping the tank up high. you know, keeping this where it's at. But anyway, I'm just kind of looking at it, and I'm pretty happy. I think this will work out well. I just need to get this piece of tube over here so I can make sure where that shock's going to fall and make sure that you know, this all continues on straight and keeping that parallel to this side. But like I said, this is really, you know, one of my favorite parts of the build, even though this is the biggest pain in the ass right now. To start to see it take shape, you know, that's kind of gets me excited. Everything else is kind of work, but this part's really where you're kind of, all the ideas are kind of coming together, and you're seeing what things are actually going to look like. But here too, you can see why it's important to start with the wheels on the bike, because if we didn't have that, you know, who knows where this stuff would end up, right? So yeah, getting the fork mounted, getting the tires on there, getting it on its feet is really important as a first step. Nothing's put into place quite yet, but you can kind of see things taking shape.